All right. Good morning, everyone. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Kim Dunn, and I am a strategic HR consultant here with the Employers Association of the Northeast. Thrilled to be here with you today on this holiday week, and glad that I have so many people participating in today's webinar. I truly hope that you enjoyed today's topic, and just a few housekeeping items that before we jump into building a culture that drives performance. If you have questions, please put your questions in either the Q&A or the chat. And the recording of this webinar and the slides will be sent out later today if you'd like to revisit anything that we talk about during today's presentation. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So today's program objectives. So every organization has a culture, but not every organization has a culture that drives performance. So when it comes to thinking about an organization's culture, those shared values and rituals that set and reinforce the tone for your employees and how they interact with each other, and those they serve. So culture is a pretty important thing. One of those topics that's sometimes hard to get our arms around. But when we think about core values and how important they are to how employees approach almost everything they do, from day-to-day tasks to how effectively your organization functions and how they serve your customers or the people that you support. So, and we all know that actions speak louder than words, and the most influential messages are conveyed by the actions of our leaders. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. What I want to make sure we cover before we reach the end of our webinar today is understanding what a culture that drives performance looks like. So we'll talk through that and give you some examples, why culture and performance are linked together, how culture impacts performance, how you can go about creating a culture that drives performance, and then of course the benefits of a culture that drives performance, because it's a lot of work to build a culture that is going to encourage performance. So you want to understand what the benefits are if you actually can get there and do this kind of great stuff. So we're going to start with first understanding what culture is. It's a word that in some cases is overused. A lot of people talk about culture. I think 20 years ago, I worked for an organization that was on the cutting edge, and they changed the name of the human resource department to the culture department. And everybody was thinking about, Petri dishes and things like that. So, but it's definitely a word that we use every day in the world of human resources and in the world of leadership. So I took a minute to look it up in Merriam-Webster, and Merriam-Webster says that culture is a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or an organization. And I think that's a great description. I think it's it definitely embodies the things that we know are important to culture. And then I read an article from Gallup, and it really described culture as sort of how we do things around here. And that's the one that's the most real to me. When we think about culture, it's, not created by just one word, one goal, or even by one person, but it's created over time with shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices. It is one of the hardest things that we do to get our arms around. But if you go to any employee, someone that has been with your organization for 10 months or 10 years, and you ask them about the culture of the organization, they'll always have something to say. What we hope it is that they're going to say some good things, some things that attract people to our organization. But oftentimes, culture can be also very negative, and that's one of the key components of. We definitely want to focus on a culture that drives performance, but we also have to recognize that culture can drive non-performance as well. So I like descriptive words. So I took a minute to put some words down that describe both good and bad culture. And so if we go through them, I did a quick Google search. So I wasn't, brilliant in sitting here and thinking about what are all the right words to put on this slide. But when I Googled good organizational culture, the words like ethical, harmonious, innovative, accountability, caring, inspiring, empathy, productive, and adventurous is what came up. And I agreed with all those. If we have those things, right, we're probably going to have what we consider a good culture. Then I did the same exact thing and I Googled, what is bad organizational culture? And these words came up. So when we think about biased, some of the things we're trying really hard to get rid of out of cultures: rigid, disengaged, cliquey, micromanaged, hostile, stressful, toxic, and unsupported all come up. So it's important for us to keep thinking about, what is our culture today? And do these words show up in our culture? And no organizational culture is perfect, because even if we have all the good things, there might be, some people within an organization might think accountability means for good culture. But then other people might look at that same word accountability and think, but it's rigid, and rigid is bad. And so what we hope to have is more of the good than the bad, so that it creates a workplace where people want to come to work and want to be a part of the organization and make it successful as it moves forward. I love this slide. I know Allison shows this often in her presentations, and I can really relate to it. So I wonder if this rings true for anyone. And if you could just put a little note in the chat. So culture is how employees' hearts and stomachs feel about Monday morning on Sunday night. So many of us have worked in organizations where we've thought about, we all love our time off and we enjoy our weekends. So it's not like I expect everybody to be like, oh, I can't wait for Monday morning. But when you have that really sick feeling in your stomach on a Sunday night of what you have to go into on Monday morning. And nowadays, with people working remotely, it may not even be that they get in their car and they drive to the office, but it may be that they're signing onto their computer and knowing what lies ahead and some of the stresses of working remotely, and not maybe even having somebody close by that we can even, have a conversation with to talk about some of the challenges. So when you think about if it can affect an employee on Sunday when they're thinking about the work that they have to do on Monday, that culture is something that can be paramount to the success of an organization. So now I want to take you through sort of these 5 concepts that drive culture. And I want to talk about each one of these circles for a minute. So when we think about leadership and communication, it's a huge part of what makes up a culture. It's really the ways that leaders define, display, and communicate an organization's purpose and their brand, and how it influences employees and even customers, how they actually exemplify their values, and remember that actions speak louder than words. So much of what leadership does in how they lead and how they communicate is not done always in words, but how they act. Think about a culture where safety, right? If an organization writes down that safety is one of their values, but then leaders of the organization aren't following safety rules, aren't wearing their PPE, aren't setting a good example, that in itself is actually sending a stronger message than the words written on a piece of paper. Then when we think about values and rituals, right, these are social interactions and a way to communicate an organization's desired identity. And we create occasions to strengthen it. So many organizations have their values written on the wall. As they do their annual strategic planning, they're making sure, do the goals that we put into our strategic plan support the values? How we interact with others when we represent the organization. And they should be relevant to employees in everything from day-to-day tasks to meetings for the entire organization. So values shouldn't be secret, and they shouldn't be something that we don't think or talk about every day. When I think about, customer focus or customer commitment or customer satisfaction, any organization that supports people or supports other organizations and customers, if we're not talking about how customer focus or customer support fits into our everyday life, then it's probably not a value that's reflected in the culture of the organization. Have you ever heard of the saying, what are people doing when no one is watching? And so that goes to the values. When you bring new employees into an organization and you read through your values with them, it's not going to stick until they see the people in the organization living those values. And it's even more challenging for organizations who have remote workers, because they may only see the values that are used and lived remotely through a virtual meeting. They may never even meet the people that they work with every day. So it's harder and harder to form those really strong cultures when they don't get to see how people act and talk and meet with each other and interact with each other. The next component that drives culture is really the people, right? And how we engage with each other, how we develop and hire our employees. Do we say one thing and do another? Do we promote in our recruiting or on our website that we're all about developing people, but then in reality, there is no actual development plan? There may not be the funding to support the development of people. Are we doing what we say we're going to do for the people when we're recruiting them and bringing them into the organization? Are we targeting the right people to create that high performance organization, or are we just filling the seat? I don't know of an HR person or a business person that doesn't have on the toughest things to do on their list for 2022 and 2023 is fill vacant seats. It's so tempting to fill it with a body and not with the right person because it's so hard to find those right people. But if we really want to focus on a culture that drives performance, it's going to be important that we fill it with the right person. Now we move on to work teams and structures. So when we think about work teams, you want to make sure that the structure that you have your organization working in supports the desired culture, because the structure is going to dictate who communicates with whom, how frequently, and on what topics. Does your organization encourage that cross-functional communication? Have you done job shadowing, or are you creating silos and sort of that stay in your lane mentality? So the structure and how people report to each other or how they work across an organization is really important. Are people open to hearing about the things that aren't working for them across an organization? Or is it the mentality of stay in your lane, do your job, and not don't question another department or how things are working? And then lastly, performance. So how are you recognizing your employees? Recognition is one of the most powerful influencers of human behavior. So goal setting and accountability are key, especially to high performers. Pay for performance pay your performers to perform. And is your management structure designed to encourage high performance? Is it rewarding the people that are actually hitting the goals or exceeding the goals, or is it rewarding people across the board for coming to work every day? And in some cases, that's the way the organization is structured, and that's the way that it is going to be. Not a lot we can change if the leaders in the organization are not looking for a culture that drives performance. But if your organization either was that or wants to be that, rewarding performance and how you reward performance is absolutely key to understanding how we'll actually reach that culture that drives performance. And as far as employees, so, how do employees know what's really important to the organization? Are we clear on setting expectations? I always think about, we sometimes are frustrated with employees that aren't reaching their goals. And the thing I always ask leaders is, did you set clear expectations? Do people know what their goal is? And do they know how to reach that goal? If those two things are there and you've got the right people in the seat, it's likely that high performance in your organization will not be hard to reach. Next, I want to do a quick poll and gain some insight from the audience today on your organization's culture and how it might affect employee engagement and retention. So I am going to launch this poll. Let's see how it'll work, and hopefully everyone will be able to see it. So if you could go ahead, it's a simple yes, no, or unsure. Does your organization's culture affect employee engagement and retention? And it could be good or it could be bad. Give it just another minute. All right, looks like we got most everyone has gone ahead. So I'm going to share the results. So overwhelmingly, 83% said yes, it does affect employee engagement and retention. We've got a couple people that said no. It could be the type of organization. It could be that it's already a great culture. I would tell you, if you've worked in a great culture and then you go to an organization that maybe doesn't have that positive high performance culture, it hits you in the face at the door because And then we've got a couple that are unsure at this time. So a little bit in the chat, let's see, I feel as though employees feel appreciated when we recognize them and let them know we see their accomplishments. It is so true. If we don't let people know these are reward the things, whether it's with a congratulations, a thank you, an actual monetary gift, whatever it is, recognizing employees for the work that they're doing is super important, and even more important with millennials and Gen Zs, because that's what they are looking for, and that's what we should be giving them. All right, thanks for your participation in that poll. So now let's talk a little bit about what is a culture that drives performance. So again, reminder that culture is based on firmly held and widely shared set of beliefs supported by strategy and structure. So when we think about successful organizations that have a culture based on these firmly held and widely shared set of beliefs, and it's supported by their structure and their strategy, it really causes three things to happen for that organization. First, employees know how management wants them to respond to any situation. So and sometimes we can tell people, right? If you're working in a call center and you've got a script and you're able to say, okay, this question equals this answer, well, that's easy. But in most cases, we don't have a script to read from. And so it takes time for an employee to get oriented into an organization. And it's confusing for employees if we tell them we want one thing, but we show them we want something else. So driving to create that culture that drives for performance is really key, that employees know how management wants them to respond in any situation. Your values are absolutely key in making that happen and living those values. So that means that they're meaningful, that people understand what those values are and that they're supported, even when sometimes living those values might mean that we upset a customer or that we upset a coworker. But if the values are that strong, that means it's the right thing. And as long as employees are rewarded for acting in the way that the values tell them to, they'll continue to do that. The second thing is that employees believe the expected response is the proper one. So you have, again, it goes about actions speak louder than words. So once we're committed to, this is our mission, this is our vision, this is our values, and those are continuously supported, people are going to believe that, and they will continue to drive that culture. And then lastly, employees know that they'll be rewarded for demonstrating the organization's values. So in some cases, organizations do things, it's, a simple way to reward people is that someone sees that they've exhibited one of the organization's values and they recognize them for it. They even allow employees to nominate other employees for recognizing that they did something that meets the organization's values. So that is what's going to create that positive culture that will drive performance. So why does it matter? Maybe culture, we had a couple of people that said it really doesn't affect, employee engagement. And so in some organizations, maybe it doesn't. I think in a lot of organizations, it does matter. So it matters because the culture that you have is going to attract world-class talent. And I think we all are chasing talent right now. We're in an economy, and we're in a world that means we want the best and the brightest. And so if we have a toxic culture, it's not going to attract that world-class talent. You think about Uber, right? So Uber went through a whole bunch of toxic things in the Me Too movement, and they lost a lot of talent, and that sticks around for a long time. Reputation is important when people are looking for what's the next organization they want to go work for. They want to work with a whole bunch more of world-class talent. So the culture is going to matter there. It also creates alignment. So it makes sure that people understand their role, what's expected of them, and how to deliver those results. So reinforcing those values in that culture is key. Culture matters because it focuses engaged employees. So we want to make sure that the engaged employees are actually doing the work that we need them to do in order to be successful. It embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion, if I could spell correctly. So we've got inclusion is what that's intended to be. And we all want that in today's workplace. It's not going to be easy for us to all get there, but critically important. It encourages innovation. So in most organizations, even if it's a nonprofit, we have to keep up with the times, and we need to consistently be looking at where we're going tomorrow. So if we've got a culture that allows people to be innovative and to use the skills that they bring to the table and not just be rigid, that's going to encourage the best and the brightest. And lastly, it drives performance results. So if you get there and you get this culture that drives performance, you're going to see the results, whether it's in the bottom line, whether it's in how you service the people that you support, whether it's how you pass an audit if you're a state, a state overseen agency. So it does matter. Culture matters to the people that we serve. So when I think about the role of human resources, it's always been to support the business. And because supporting the business means that we have the responsibility to help build that culture that drives performance. And sometimes that means that we have to share that good, bad, and ugly with leadership. Some leadership is a little more open to hearing it, and others maybe would like to put their head under the desk and hope that's not true. but it's HR's role to make sure that we share the things that we know to be true about our culture, and the things that aren't so good, we can help the organization make better. So I'm curious if you can put in the chat for me a few words that this picture makes you think of. And not everyone may know about Rosie the Riveter here, but certainly the boomers know about it, and the Xers know about it. But anything that you think of when you see this picture. I got perseverance, empowerment. Yep, empowerment, strength, and perseverance. It's just a picture, and yet it brings out these words, hard worker, right? It's meaningful. So a little bit about Rosie the Riveter. I think I got this again. I don't know if it was off of, I think it was the Britannica Encyclopedia, but both romantic and heroic figure from World War II era. A former housewife turned war hero, Rosie emerged from the kitchen and built the machinery necessary to fight and win World War II. So posters of her emblazoned with her pictures became a symbol of wartime courage and patriotism. She also inspired thoughts of a strong, confident female worker flexing her muscle with the words emblazoned above it, "We can do it." The Rosies were bold, breaking down barriers and proving without a doubt that women could accomplish some of the same tasks as men. So just we can do it, right? It's that feeling of we can get there. And that's when I look at this picture and I think about a culture that drives performance, this picture says it all for me. It's that motivation of we can actually do it. So I want to do another poll for you here and hopefully get some chat going. Has your organization backed off from giving honest and effective feedback on performance evaluations since the post-pandemic Great Resignation era? So again, I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll and see what people are thinking out there. Here we go. Just another minute. All right. Going to share the results. So these results, this is a good thing, not exactly what I had expected, because I hear so many organizations tell me every day that they're feeling like they're not being as direct with some of their employees because they're fearing that they don't want them to quit, leave, and go to another organization because they were too honest in their performance evaluation. They'd rather have a mediocre performer than a vacancy. But I think what this poll is telling us, and that's why I asked, is that this is good news, that you're still holding your people accountable, you're still setting good goals, and you're still giving honest feedback to your employees. So Heather's got something in the chat. It's partly because managers are afraid to lose people. That's what I hear often. And at least it's somebody in the seat. But the good news is the poll is saying that that is not always the case. And so credit to those organizations who are still giving good feedback. In order to have a workplace culture that drives performance, we have to give people feedback. And the good news is for the millennials and the Gen Zs, who are in some cases, millennials are running big parts of organizations these days, they're asking for the feedback and they want people to tell them how they're doing at work. So I think that's good. That's good for everyone involved. So now let's talk for a minute about how an effective culture impacts performance. So these are just a few things I could go on and on about all the good things that impact performance. But I also, as we go through each of these, I want us to remember that a negative culture can take all these things in the absolute wrong direction. So it's really about creating that right culture that's going to get us where we need to be. It's going to help us attract the best talent. It leads to innovation, and there aren't many, there's some, certainly the tech industry, they're always looking for what's next and what's the most innovative thing that people can do. But even small privately held companies, everything we do, if we're not thinking about innovating, changing, growing, and making things better or easier or more repeatable, then there's a really good chance that the organization will not be successful in the long term. An effective culture stresses common values and common goals, results in better retention. And again, we want to make sure we're retaining the right people, not just all the people. But when we think of the cost of turnover and what it costs to try to rebuild if we haven't done a good job of documenting processes, bringing someone new into the organization, sometimes it can take a year or more just to get them up to speed. Remember, we don't want to retain people if they're bringing our culture down, though. That's when we have to have the courage to make sure we're addressing those issues. If we've got someone who's been with the organization for 20 years and they may be the best technical person, but they're eating away at our good, productive culture every day, we've got to have the courage to address those situations. Effective culture is accepting and celebrating diversity. It encourages those checks and balances. So, you think about, you don't want to have Big Brother watching, but when you have a strong culture and people are living the values, they'll identify if something isn't going in the direction that the organization is saying we need it to go in that direction. And so your culture can actually help you have checks and balances. People who are passionate about the organization and care about the success will actually bring to the attention of leadership if something isn't in line with their values, especially when they have that culture that embraces people coming forward with challenges. Long-term commitment to excellence. So, certainly in the for-profit world of making sure that we remain competitive, and in the nonprofit world where we're serving people, maybe in our community, we want to make sure we're committing to excellence. I don't know too many value statements that say we want to almost be excellent. We really, really want to do the best and deliver the best possible care or the best possible product to our customers. Greater efficiency, in the world, especially in the US now, right? So much of what we do is service work versus actually producing parts. And thankfully, we're still doing some of that. And post-pandemic, hopefully some of that comes back to the US. But efficiency, the way we get our work done, in most cases, the number one expense in our budgets is human power. So, when we can do more faster, we're going to make more money, or we're going to deliver more services. And then lastly, it creates a marketing advantage. So think about how many people our people come into contact with. So if we have a positive culture and people on the weekend see their family, friends, and they talk about, so what are you doing for work now? Is the first thing that comes out of their mouth, I work for this amazing company. I've been there X number of years and it's still work, but I love it. I respect it. Or is it that they're looking for a change because they're working in an organization that isn't accepting, isn't embracing diversity, and just has a toxic environment? So it creates a marketing advantage in the marketing that you don't pay for. It's free because your employees are sharing, but it also can create that marketing advantage. If you look at some of the organizations, Google for a long time was, everybody wanted to go work for Google. They had free food, they had games. It was this just really fun place to work. So it can even create a marketing advantage for you in how your employees embrace the work that they do. So then let's talk. So we want to talk about how culture impacts performance. So, knowing what a culture that drives performance can get you, innovation, et cetera, let's talk about how it actually impacts the organization itself. So if we think about the what, right? So let's say it's innovation that we get from this amazing culture that drives performance. Innovation is going to create empowered employees, employees that feel like they know what the organization wants them to do, and they're going to continue coming up with innovative ideas and making the organization better and stronger. If we think about the what being common values and goals, this gives our people a sense of direction and mission. It shows them this is why we're in business and this is what we're here to do. It gives us better retention, and the how is because employees feel valued and they're on a winning team. It doesn't matter if we're on the softball team when we were 10 years old, or we're 30 years old and we want to work for an organization that's consistently getting new customers and delivering more services. We all want to be on that winning team. Accepting, if the what is accepting and celebrating diversity, that's going to help us with collaboration and getting results. So if people feel like they're accepted and they're valued and they can share their opinion or their idea, that's going to lead to better collaboration. Better collaboration leads to better results. If the what is that it encourages checks and balances, it means that the how is that employees are stewards of our culture. So when they really believe that this is the culture that the organization lives, and they do that by knowing the norms and seeing how people act even when no one's looking, they'll be the ones that bring up the issues when something is going wrong inside the organization. If the what is long-term commitment to excellence, right? This is going to help create employee loyalty. You want to work for an organization that consistently is getting awards, is seen as the top in the industry, is maybe competing with the giants, right? So I think back, I worked in manufacturing about 15, 20, well, I guess it's 20 years ago now. And we were fighting China. That was the enemy. We did not want the plant that we worked in to close up and move to China. And so every day we had this culture of, we have to do it better here in the US than they can do it in China. We have to make a better product and we have to do it more cost effectively so that our plant doesn't go to China. So it's that long-term commitment to excellence. And then, let's say the what is greater efficiency. That's going to help us stay focused on the right things. There's so many things that go on inside organizations every day that can be distractions. Making sure that we're focused on the right things and that it's not too complicated to do that is really the how. And then lastly, creates this marketing advantage, right? What will employees tell their friends and family? So having that positive culture means they go home, tell their friends and family. We do these incentives for people to refer other family members or friends to our organizations. But if we don't have a culture that people feel good about, they're probably not going to be the ones that make those referrals to your organization. So another reason why culture is so important to performance. So how do we get there, right? We all want the how-to cookbook. There's 10 steps here, 5 on this slide, 5 on the next. And, it's not a perfect prescription, but I think if we do these things, it's going to help us get to a culture that drives performance. So the first thing, we started today's webinar by talking about what culture is understanding what the culture is inside your organization. And if changes are necessary, maybe you already have a great culture and it's moving in the right direction. Maybe it needs a few little tweaks because maybe the values are not reflecting what we need to reflect today. And it's always good to go back and take a look at those. Then if you decide that change is needed, what behaviors are you looking for? So behaviors are the things that is going to change culture, because remember, culture is that norm. It's how people act. It's how we do things around here. So if there's something that needs tweaking, it's thinking about what are those behaviors that are going to influence the results that you're actually looking for. The third thing is to reframe the mindsets of your employees. So you want to explain to them, why is it that we might need to make these changes, and help people understand what changing behaviors is going to mean to employees. Then we've got to go ahead and create some of these initiatives that reinforce those behaviors. So we can't just put it on a piece of paper and say, all right, we're gonna change our culture to a more performance-driven culture. We have to actually do things like measuring. We might need new metrics that measure new things that are actually going to help us get those results that we're looking for. And then we need a change story, right? Why? Humans need to understand why things are changing. Maybe it's that we're not as competitive as we used to be. Maybe the economy is more challenging than it used to be. But be transparent and let employees know why you might be looking to change some of the behaviors within your organization. Then develop an action plan. So I might even put this develop an action plan first, but I think we need to first examine if our culture needs changing. But it's all about, if it doesn't get written down, it doesn't get done. So carefully plan out your goals and how you want to monitor the results of the actions that you put in place to help create this culture that drives performance. Then you're going to want to implement some employee-centric changes. So, the leaders have to set the example, but employees need to know what's expected of them and why. So some communication, employees want, and a good way to potentially implement some of these things for those that use competencies in performance management. Maybe there's a new competency that people are going to get measured on. So you roll that out, you explain what the new competency is, you explain to them what those behaviors are that we are looking for in order to be successful at that competency. And then employees start acting in that way. Again, leaders have to lead. Then you want to recognize and communicate key data. So back to the measurement. Humans are going to want to, they want to be successful, especially those who are motivated by winning. But you've got to give them some data. We can't just say, hey, we want you to change these behaviors, and then not go back and tell them what we accomplished by changing some of that, and then making sure that we reward the people for the high performance. Measure and drive, again, another spelling error, for high performance. So measure those results and rewards, show employees how to win, and high performers will come to the table and make sure that they're able to give you that win. And then hire the best people for the job. So this is the most difficult thing that we do every single day when we're bringing people into the organization. We need somebody to do the work, but are they the best person for that job? Are they the right people that are going to get us the results that we're looking for? And are they going to fit into our culture? So when we're bringing someone new, it's important to use some of those behavioral interview questions. Make sure that we share with them what our culture is about and what the expectations of the organization are. And then use change management. I learned this the hard way in working on some culture things about 10 years ago. I was too deep in the weeds and didn't take a step back to remember that human beings need to understand change, and leaders need to lead change. So, a couple of things to think about when you're attempting to make some change to that culture. You have to establish that sense of urgency. Why do we need to do it, and why do we need to do it now? It's about telling that story. creating that guiding coalition. So who is your team of people that are going to help get this message out for you and help walk the walk and live the behaviors? Creating that shared vision. So what is it going to look like when we get there? What does this high performance culture look like? And then communicate that vision, absolutely empower those people, create those short-term wins and communicate them, reward the people that are helping you get those wins, and then build on the gains and institutionalize the change. Institutionalize is what culture is really all about. It's about the way we do things around here. So don't forget change management. And then the benefits, because if we do all this hard work, you know, we want to make sure that we reap the benefits of doing that. So a culture attracts world-class talent. We talked about that a few slides back. The alignment is absolutely key. When you have an organization and one department doesn't know what the other department is doing, or one department leader communicated that you know, we're going to have a different kind of performance management process this year, but the other leader didn't realize it was their job to communicate that, we've got chaos. So we need alignment in order to get everybody moving in the forward direction. We want to make sure that it's going to focus on engaged employees. So engaged employees are going to get us results. It embraces diversity and inclusion. So another benefit, encourages that innovation. Again, sometimes people think innovation is only important in those for-profit organizations. And I would tell you that innovation is important in all organizations. And it drives for performance results. So when we want to hit that target, whether it's a profit target, whether it's a customer target, whether it's how many people we can serve target, or how we can make the environment better target, we want to make sure people are aligned in order to get those results, and your culture will help you do that. So I use this slide a lot when I'm talking about performance management, and it seemed like a good topic to bring it in. And I just want to remind people, right? High performing team is what we're all hoping to get. We all want to be on that winning team, but it really starts with the foundation. So if we go back to making sure that we set clear expectations. So all employees need clear expectations, and that goes back to those values that organizations design and build into their strategic plan, into their mission and vision. Then we want to make sure that our employees have the right skills and the right training to actually do the work. And again, I talked about it early in the webinar, that if we're promising that in our ads to attract talent, and then once they get there, it's sort of like we put you through a couple of days of orientation and then you go figure it out, that's probably not going to get you the high performing team. Holding people accountable. That's the way. High performers want to be held accountable. They want to be recognized for their accomplishments. And the not so high performers probably aren't looking to be held accountable. But if we don't do that, we're going to create disillusion from those high performers that other people aren't being held accountable. And we're going to continue to perpetuate maybe mediocre performers. So accountability is key. We want to make sure we reward those performers. And then we have to help the non-performers move on. And sometimes this is the hardest thing we do, is actually accepting that we've got some people on the team that might not make it. And when we put all that together, that creates our high performing team for us. So just to recap on the power of changing culture, it really lies in activating and pulling those right levers within these 5 drivers: this leadership, communication, values, our people, work teams and structure, and performance. And when leaders and managers begin to live out a clear and consistent aligned culture that inspires high commitment, employees begin to believe in and live out the organization's purpose in their daily work, in everything they do, and ultimately deliver to the customer the promise in a really powerful way. So when I think about each of you in your own organizations, how do your leaders act when they're not in the office? How do they act when they're away at a conference or they're sitting with a customer? How do they act regarding safety if you're an organization that values safety when no one is watching? This is really what employees see and believe, and will create that culture of performance if the actions match the words. So I like this slide. Leaders build culture to drive performance. So leaders create culture, culture drives behavior, and behavior produces results. This will not happen if those leaders don't believe in it, drive it, and live it. And so culture, which is hard to put our arms around, we know that it's this thing, and we can't easily change it or manipulate it. We can affect it in a positive way. It really starts with leaders. It's making sure we've got those right behaviors and that we're reinforcing the right behaviors and we're addressing the wrong behaviors. And the behaviors of our people is what is going to lead us to the results that actually help us become that high performance organization. So just to wrap up, a few takeaways. We talked about culture that drives performance, and what does it look like? So it's that organization where employees know the expectations and know they'll be rewarded for demonstrating the organization's values. It's that why are culture and performance linked? Because actions speak louder than words. So the culture is going to drive those behaviors that drive the performance. How culture impacts performance, we got to remember the good, the bad, and the ugly, because a negative culture can actually drive performance in the wrong direction. It can put organizations out of business. It can make for massive people leaving an organization. And in some ways, if they're the wrong people, having them leave is the right thing. You may want to control that so that it doesn't all happen at one time, but making sure that the culture and the behaviors are doing the right things for us. And then creating a culture that drives performance, right? It's all about the behaviors. It's about change management, having a plan, making sure we measure the right things, and most importantly, hiring the right people. And then lastly, the benefits of a culture that's driving performance. We're going to attract that talent, that world-class talent. We're going to get alignment, which is so hard to do. Engagement, again, those organizations that have done some engagement surveys and they're winning at that, congratulations. It takes a lot of work to make sure your employees are actively engaged. Hopefully you're going to have that diversity of thought and people. And then innovation and all of that will lead to results for you. So now we've got a little bit of time left for some Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to stop sharing and pull up the Q&A or the chat, and we'll see if we can't. We've got, here's our chat. All right, so let's see. I understand the importance of measuring results. What is the best measurement? Retention, so great point. Best measurement for success can be that people stay as long as they're the right people that are staying. So sometimes I hear organizations all the time say, well, that person's been here 25 years. Are they a good performer? Are they living the values of the organization? Are they getting you the results that you need? So absolutely important. And then sometimes the measurement is in employee engagement. So lots of organizations are doing engagement surveys to see, are people staying for the right reasons? Are they contributing? Do they feel welcome? Employee engagement can also be a good way to measure. Anybody else have questions about creating that culture that drives performance? I'd love to try to address those if you have them. If not, I appreciate your participation in today's webinar and hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll stay on for a few more minutes and see if we get any additional questions. And remember, the webinar slides will be sent out to those of you who participated in today's webinar. And you'll also have access to the recording. All right, looks like we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you for participating in today's webinar.